You just spent $80, $100, maybe $150,000 on a brand new 4x4. It is your dream rig. It has all the kit you have ever wanted and you can't wait to hit the beach, cross some rivers and actually start using this thing. But there's a massive problem the second you leave the road, and that is rust. It is a subject that most people brush off because they don't really understand the problem. They kind of joke about it like the mythical LandCruiser handbrake that just doesn't exist and we should just live with it, or they just say it's just a farm truck, deal with it. But in reality, it costs you a lot more than you realize. And it's not just your wallet, it risks your safety, your family's safety, and the safety of the other road users. And today, I want to take a deep dive into this subject and explain why you should care about rust prevention and give you a comprehensive guide on what products to consider to protect your LandCruiser, 4x4 trailer, caravan, or anything else that might get rusty. But before we dig deeper into this topic, as this is going to be a technical video, I have added timestamps below for you to use if you want to jump ahead to a particular section that interests you more. However, I do recommend you watching the whole video so it all makes sense at the end. I also want to be very upfront with you on two very important things. First and foremost, this video, like all of my previous videos, is not sponsored or paid for by anybody else except myself. Second, as you can see from my personalized number plates, and if you haven't noticed the signage on my LandCruiser, I deal with coatings for a living and in particular corrosion protection, hence the number plate no rust. So, one of the products on this list is in fact a product that I do sell, and it is my best selling in Australia for reasons that I hope you will see later on. With this out of the way, I don't want you to see this as a bias or negative for this video. I want you to see me as somebody who loves his cruiser, enjoys using it off-road and for what it was meant to do, but with the added benefit of having years of experience and knowledge in the coatings and corrosion prevention industry. By no means do I think I'm an expert in the field, but I do deal with the experts on a daily basis, and I have spent quite a lot of years now visiting labs, talking to the scientists who make and test these products, talking to engineers and buyers, and helping small businesses offer corrosion protection as part of their service. So think of my involvement as a good thing because you're getting information straight from someone who does this for a living day to day, instead of someone just sharing an opinion or being sponsored to promote random products. With this clarified, let's dive straight in. The biggest mistake I see around me, both online and from people that I personally know, is the out of sight, out of mind problem. Because rust forms slowly and it's on the underside of the car, most people, most of the time, treat this issue as tomorrow's problem. That it won't happen to me or I'll deal with it when it happens mentality. However, the problem with that approach is that rust forms straight away and it doesn't stop. And I don't like using this example, but it is kind of like cancer. It spreads and gets worse, making it harder and more expensive to fix the longer you leave it. Imagine your chassis snapping when you're loaded or towing midway through a trip in the outback, or some critical steering or suspension mechanism breaking when you go over some rough bumps on the road. It does sound a little bit extreme, but it is true, and I think you're getting where I'm coming from. It can be pretty dangerous. And Australia, as well as many other countries, have very harsh, salty roads and environments. There is also a group of car owners that don't care about this issue because they don't keep their cars long enough to have this issue happen and become serious. And I get that as well, but these cars cost well over $100,000. And many easily triple or quadruple that. So when it's time to sell your car, the next buyer is smart, and when they have your 4x4 inspected, they're going to see your neglect, and at that point, the money you lose on the resale value, it's going to be considerably more than what it would have cost you protecting it to begin with. And on top of that, your rig is now harder to sell and it's going to take longer to sell. Therefore, the point I'm trying to make here is that prevention is always better than cure, and far cheaper too. Before we look at the products on the market, let's understand how anti-corrosion coatings are tested and rated, because that's going to be very important so you can understand the rest of the video. Just like how an engine has horsepower and torque figures, an air compressor has liters per minute flow rate, and a battery system has volts and amps per hour, anti-corrosion coatings are validated using a number of international standards and metrics. That way, engineers can compare apples with apples when they evaluate different products. For corrosion coatings in particular, this is mainly using the American Society for Testing and Materials Standards, or as I'll refer to them as ASTM, and the International Organization for Standardization, which you might have heard of because it's also known as ISO. In a nutshell, these are very specific tests using calibrated machines to ensure that product A is exposed to the exact same conditions and test as product B, so the tests can be compared. That's kind of like measuring weight using kilograms or pounds as the standard measure and a calibrated and accurate scale. So that way, when you're evaluating two different products, you can determine which one is lighter and which one is heavier, regardless of the manufacturer, or where the product is made, or who their seller is, because you know that a kilogram is a kilogram and the pound is a pound. Whilst there are over 13,000 ASTM standards and equally as many ISO standards, to make this video easier to understand and easier to make, I'm going to compare coatings primarily against one ASTM test, which is ASTM B117. This is the most popular test for evaluating corrosion resistance, and it is the salt spray test. This test accelerates corrosion to simulate years of exposure to harsh environments such as beach driving. A coated test sample, for example steel, is placed in an enclosed chamber that is maintained at 35 degrees Celsius, and then it is continuously sprayed with an atomized, dense fog mixture of pure water and 5% salt that is strictly kept at a pH level of 6.5 to 7.2 to create a highly conductive electrolyte environment. This is like a time chamber for rust. These probably don't mean much to you now, but let's give you some examples that you can relate to. We all know ColourBond steel in Australia, and according to BlueScope's own technical data, ColourBond steel is rated to last 3,000 hours in this salt spray chamber. To give you an example more related to a caravan and trailer, the best heavy-duty hot dip galvanization at 85 microns will not last much longer than 1,000 hours in this chamber before it starts rusting. So it is a very aggressive and harsh environment in that chamber. We also need to understand that there are other aspects of coatings beyond just salt spray resistance, and these include how resistant they are to being immersed in water for prolonged periods of time, resistance to chipping and cracking, resistance to solvent and UV rays, and other chemicals, etc. Now that we got the technical data out of the way, and thank you for staying with me until now, I'm going to show you how this information is used in the real world. On the screen now is an example to compare IGL Aegis and Nylac using ASTM test results. I'm not going to go through it line by line, but from the results you can see that IGL Aegis has 6,000 hours of durability for salt spray, Nylac has 1,000 hours of durability for salt spray, so you can assume that IGL Aegis will last 6 times longer than Nylac when exposed to salt spray. I have left a download link to this document in the comment section below, so you can look at it in closer detail later on after watching this video. But I hope this kind of shows you how this information is used. Now let's break down the rust prevention options in the market into 4 distinct categories. Each category has its own pros and cons, and again, this is to my understanding and research, so please correct me in the comment section if I have made any mistakes. I only really know my own product, not everybody else's. Category 1 are the neutralizers. They work by using surfactants and ionic displacement. In other words, they reduce the bond between the salt and the bodywork, allowing the salt to be dissolved and rinsed off easier when you rinse the car after a beach run. This is why with these products, it's recommended to rinse the salt off after driving on the beach and then reapply the product. The pro, they do prevent rust by removing the salt after you've had your fun. But the cons is that there is no barrier here. These are not anti-corrosion coatings. These are products made to clean the underbody better after you drive on the beach. And as you can expect, no product in this category is ASTM or ISO tested for corrosion protection because they don't protect against corrosion. Category 2 are the sacrificial sprays. Products like Lanolin, Bowden's Under Armour, WD-40 Lanolin, and many more. There are lots of examples of these kinds of products in the market. These give you temporary hydrophobic coatings with limited temporary rust protection. And these are very affordable, easy to apply, and readily available anywhere. In this category, you have 2 very different paths. First is lanolin. Lanolin is a natural wax from sheep's wool. There are many products on the market that use lanolin technology, but they're all reasonably similar. And whilst most lanolin spray coatings have a rating of 200 to 300 salt spray hours, from my research, the best performing lanolin-based coating in this category is fluid film with a rating of 1,298 salt spray hours. Although it does kind of cross into category 3, which we'll talk about later on. The pros of lanolin-based coatings is they are cheap and easy to apply. They're also environmentally friendly and safe to use on various surfaces. I do use WD-40 lanolin on my locks for the canopy on the Cruiser to keep them lubricated and rust-free inside, but lanolin does have some cons, and that is that they do dry sticky, making dirt and sand sticking to them an issue. They're also temporary, fairly fragile coatings that require reapplication. They're not resistant against chemicals, solvents, or physical contact. So every time you touch or clean that surface, you need to recoat it again. A different kind of product in this category is Bowden's Under Armour, and this is a water-based polymer sealant. Because there is no data to show how long it protects or any validation as such, I can't really compare it to any other product. However, from my prior testing in an older video on my other detailing channel, I have found it to perform similar to the entry-level DIY lanolin sprays, but without the drawback of being sticky. Category 3 are the heavy oils. Fluid film is here again. You also have surface shield and wool wax. These are active coatings. They'll never truly dry, which lets them creep into the spot welds and crevices that other coatings can't get to. And because of this, they are used heavily for spraying inside of chassis rails and door seals as well as other gaps. For the pros, they do have a level of self-healing and movement. If a rock chips the coating, the oil does migrate over the scratch because it doesn't really dry, it's always a little bit runny. And because they are applied so thick, they do give good corrosion protection, especially when they seep into areas that other products can't reach. The cons, they're messy, they attract sand and mud, and they are limited in their resistance against solvents and chemicals. As they don't really dry, I imagine that gravity is going to make the coating have a thinner layer up the top and a much thicker layer down the bottom where gravity pulls the product down, but that's just my assumption. And to my understanding, these coatings can be washed off, so you do need to reapply it after you degrease your car or wash the underbody because they're oil-based. However, it is also the best choice for an older rig that already has some rust forming because it soaks in and stops the rust from spreading. It is worth noting that in this category, the durability is influenced by many factors due to the soft nature of the product. Despite Blaster Surface Shield having 2,000 hours of salt spray testing and Fluid Film having almost 1,300 hours, they don't claim very high durability ratings when used under the vehicle. Blaster Shield claims only 2 years, where Fluid Film only claims up to 1 year of durability. Category 4 are the industrial professional coatings. These are where the heavy hitters come in. These products are heavily validated and designed for commercial and industrial use. The data is provided for engineers to review and evaluate for major projects as opposed to retail marketing claims and advertisements. As these products are engineered for a variety of industries and applications, primarily in very harsh conditions such as mining and offshore oil and gas, these products tend to be higher performing and have a higher variety of other attributes to their performance beyond just rust protection. Because in the real world, a coated surface is exposed to a variety of environmental factors, attributes such as UV stability, chemical resistance, adhesion strength, and solvent resistance makes these coatings superior and longer lasting to the previous 3 categories. In this category and relevant for anti-corrosion protection on vehicles, IGL Aegis is the outliner with a salt spray rating of 6,000 hours, as well as over 20 other validations for different performance criteria. It is the only product that contains Petronas graphene, which is a key ingredient used in the coatings developed by Petronas to protect their offshore oil rigs from corrosion in the middle of the sea. Some other pros for this category, and primarily for IGL Aegis, includes hydrophobic properties to resist dirt, sand and mud, as well as ease of repair and touching up. The cons for this category is that these coatings are precisely engineered chemicals. To achieve the verified results, they must be applied correctly with the correct preparation and carried out to the correctly prepped surface. Because of this, in many countries, IGL Aegis and other products in this category are restricted from public purchase and must be applied through a certified applicator network that can ensure the correct application process is done. However, in Australia, we are fortunate because anybody can buy IGL Aegis, but care needs to be taken on how it's applied. Another limitation in this category is that these products are trickier to install in tight spots and hidden areas such as inside of the chassis rails, because you can't really verify that the product has been applied correctly where you can't see it or measure it. By this point in the video, you're probably wondering why I haven't mentioned bitumen-based coatings and electronic rust protection. In my view, both of these products are not viable options in today's world. Let me explain. Traditional black bitumen-based coatings have a maximum durability rating of 1,500 hours in ASTM B117, with most coatings failing below 1,000 hours. And because they are black and cover the entire surface, when they do fail, and every coating does eventually fail, you're going to develop rust, but you're not going to see this rust until your chassis rail snaps in half. It also immediately devalues your vehicle and looks horrible. As a matter of fact, this is the kind of coating people use to hide rust before selling a very rusty car. The only pros that these bitumen-based coatings have is their high resistance to chipping and impact. But this attribute also makes them incredibly expensive and difficult to remove and redo, or at least inspect, where all the other coatings we have discussed so far are reasonably easy to repair and reapply. So they don't last as long as the other coatings, but they're very difficult to remove and reapply, and you can't really inspect them and keep an eye on them, so if rust does happen, it's going to cause major problems later down the road. That's why I don't really recommend those bitumen-based products. Electronic rust prevention, on the other hand, has not been proven to work in cars at all. From my research, the scientific consensus is that whilst cathodic protection works for submerged structures such as pipelines and ships, it's ineffective for preventing rust above the waterline, especially for use on cars. Therefore, neither electronic rust protection or bitumen coatings are options that I will ever recommend or do to my own cars. So what is the verdict, and what coating should you get for your 4x4? Well, this kind of depends on your specific situation and vehicle. If you are on a very limited budget or your car is older and already has some rust, your only options are lanolin based sprays from either category 2 or 3. Unless you're prepared to carry out a full proper restoration to fix that rust. If you're seeking the best, most durable and strongest corrosion protection for a brand new car or a vehicle that's been restored, IGL Aegis is the undisputed champion. It is heavily certified and validated to exceed any other option in the market, but it does require skilled application and proper preparation. Items in category 1 and 3 to me are supplemental products. Heavy oils in category 3 should complement products like IGL Aegis, and they should be sprayed inside of the chassis rails or any gaps that you can't get the category 4 coating to go into, so you can get the best result of both products without any of the cons. And finally, products in category 1 should still be used as upkeep to maintain your 4x4. Even if you have the IGL Aegis coating, it's not going to impact the coating, but it's going to help you wash the salt away better. With all of this done and out of the way, please let me know your thoughts. Have you had any rust proofing done to your pride and joy? And how has your experience been? Also, if you have found value in this video, please don't forget to check out the next one right here for more tips, tricks, and adventures. Thank you for watching, and catch you in the next video.